Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this evening's gallery talk on the late artist Libbie Mark and the exciting exhibition that surrounds us. For those of you I don't know, my name is Mitch Case and I'm with the National Arts Club. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we're a 501c3 nonprofit based here in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public. This includes exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures and readings, and more. For more information and an upcoming schedule, you can visit nationalartsclub.org or check for a calendar at the front desk. Tonight's talk will be given by Dr. Joan M. Marter and Jennifer Uhrhane. Dr. Marter is a Board of Governors Professor Emerita at Rutgers University, where she taught from 1977 to 2016. At Rutgers, she was also director of the Curatorial Studies program from 1990 to 2016. Especially knowledgeable on women American artists, since 2016, Dr. Marter has co-edited the Women's Art Journal, which serves as a forum for feminist approaches to women artists from various art historical periods to the present. In 2011, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Women's Caucus for Art at the annual meeting of the Collage Art Association. Dr. Marter has guest curated many exhibitions and has written and edited numerous books and catalogs. These include Women of Abstract Expressionism, The Grove Encyclopedia of American Art, Abstract Expressionism, The International Context, and Off Limits, Rutgers University and the Avant-Garde, 1957 to 1963. She holds a BA in Visual Arts and Art History from Tyler School of Art, Temple University, and an MA and PhD in Art History from the University of Delaware. Welcome, Dr. Marter. And Jennifer is a consultant to the Libbie Mark Provincetown Fund and co-curator of this exhibition with Robert Yonner of the National Arts Club. For almost 20 years, Jennifer has worked in curatorial, collections, management, and registrarial roles for such institutions as the Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum, the Polaroid Corporate Photography Collections, Worcester Art Museum, Photographic Resource Center, and Foundation for the Exhibition of Photography. She has authored, co-authored, and edited a number of publications for De Cordova, including Lucien Agner, Photo Story, Painting in Boston, 1950 to 2000, and 2 De Cordova annual exhibitions. Jennifer also independently consults with private arts collectors, artists, and families of artists regarding art, archive documentation, collections care, and estate planning. Before her work with the Libbie Mark Estate, Jennifer negotiated a joint home for photographer Lucien Agner's substantial estate archive at the Addison Gallery of American Art at Phillips Academy, Yale University Art Gallery, and Yale's Beinecke Rare Books and Manuscript Library. She holds a BF in photography from Rhode Island School of Design, a graduate certificate in museum studies and administration from Tufts University, and an MA in art history from Boston University. Welcome, Jennifer, and please enjoy the talk.
I am delighted to be here to present some ideas about the great achievement of Libbie Mark. You can see the paintings. They're absolutely wonderful, stunning works. And she deserves far more attention than she has received. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the plight of women artists among the abstract expressionists, and then more specifically to talk about Libbie's artistic career and how it proceeded through several decades. So I thought that it would be interesting to mention that initially, abstract expressionism, when people started to organize exhibitions of the work of the artists of the abstract expressionist group, they were really exhibitions about men. There were times when there were virtually no women in the shows, and I'm talking now about the shows that came along in the 1960s. There were group shows in the 1950s, and the women participated in them, but that was really before the artists became very well known. And as we all know, it was first Jackson Pollock, who died in '56, who made a huge splash. And then there were other artists that came along after him, and the prices kept going up, and these artists got a lot of attention. It took much longer for the women. I can remember that there was an exhibition at the Whitney Museum called Abstract Expressionism, The Formative Years. And in that show, there was one woman. It happened to be Lee Krasner, who was also Mrs. Jackson Pollock. So that's, you know, and Pearl Fine wanted to be in the show. I read through the files in the museum, and she had written to them and said she felt that she should be in the show also. This was in the 1970s. And she was not chosen for the show. So women came along, women who were declaring themselves to be interested in women artists, teaching courses in women artists, and that includes me. I started teaching courses in women artists around the mid-1970s. And I thought that it was really important to have shows that included women. And also there was a journal that came out that we're still publishing. It started in 1980, and it's still publishing. We're working on our next issue now, called the Woman's Art Journal. And I am the editor-in-chief, but originally I was one of the writers. I decided that I was going to have my students who were in a curatorial program, curatorial studies program, organize an exhibition. And I was so nervous about calling it Women Abstract Expressionists that I called it Women and Abstract Expressionism. That was like a little bit of a cheat on my part, because I didn't want to be you know, too outrageous of claiming these women for abstract expressionism. This show was in 1997, and it was at Baruch College, City University, and it also was shown at Guildhall in East Hampton. It was painting and sculpture. The one sculptor in the show was Dorothy Daner. The rest were painters. And predictably, the New York Times, Hilton Kramer, had some really awful things to say about me and about the show. And he said there was only one good artist in the show, and that was Joan Mitchell. Well, I'm not too surprised with that. But anyway, he said that I was really pushing things, you know, to have claiming these women. As we know, everything has changed. And there are, in fact, and I think Jennifer has some catalogs too to present. I have one where I just wrote an essay. It's called Heroines of Abstract Expressionism. This is a catalog from 2019 that traveled. It started out in Cooperstown, New York, and then it went to Fenimore Art Museum in Cooperstown, New York, and then it went to the Nassau County Museum. And this also was a show of painting and sculpture. And I also wrote, she has sparkling Amazons there, I love that title. I also was the co-organizer of this show, which is in 2016. And this was something of a breakthrough, because this show at the Denver Art Museum didn't come to New York, even though we struggled very hard to get a venue in New York. It went to Palm Springs, California, and it went to North Carolina, to a museum in North Carolina. But the catalog made a big splash. This catalog is now, if you go to talk to certain dealers, maybe Anita would agree with this, many dealers consider this catalog to be the Bible, because there are biographies and images of many, many women in the back. I think over 20 women. Plus there is a huge chronology about women in abstract expressionism. And I heard not too long ago from another publisher that this catalog has sold over 7,000 copies, which is, for a catalog, that's pretty impressive. Mary Gabriel's book is another story. That's probably sold many more than the 7,000 copies. There it is. This is a book of, I would call gossip, but it's very popular. It's probably going to become a TV series. Amazon bought it. So what it's suggesting to us is that women artists have come into their own. And many of these artists are no longer with us. Their work has been shown over the years, and their prices are going up, and they are getting recognition, and they're included in many different exhibitions. And that brings me to Libbie Mark, who has, as you can see here, some remarkable work that she's done. Libbie was somewhat unusual among the artists that I know of personally and that many have read about. People like Grace Hardigan, for example, who had many husbands along the way and lovers. But not only that, she at one time gave birth to a child. And the child spent most of his life, his early life, with his grandparents. And she felt a little upset about it and was unhappy about it. But nonetheless, she wanted to be in New York. She wanted to be with the artists. And then there was Louise Nevelson, same thing. She had a child, she was married, she gave that up, she left the husband, she sent her young child back to live with his grandparents. And there's much that's been written about that. Libbie Mark was different. Libbie Mark had a lovely marriage. She came from New Jersey. She was born in 1905. And she got married fairly young, but not so unusual there for the time. And she had 2 children. She had Judith, who was born in 1935, and she has Reuben. She had Reuben, who's with us today, who was born in 1939. And she lived first in Jersey City, and then she moved to Great Neck. And she wanted to be with her children. So she managed the creation of some of her art and the continuation of her study of art while her children were growing up. She worked initially, I understand, in the basement of her house in Great Neck, New York. But I don't think there's any question that she came into New York probably to see some of the current exhibitions that were being done downtown, in the downtown galleries. So all through the period that her children were growing up, she was very much aware of what was going on in the art world. She studied at an adult program in fine arts at Great Neck, in Great Neck. That's where she started. And when her children went off to college, she and her husband moved or tried to, let's say, try out living in New York City. And that was a very big opportunity for her. She started taking classes at the Art Students League. And there she studied with Vaclav Vitlichil. She took life drawing classes, which was, I guess, a good start for her. But Vitlichil had been an assistant to Hans Hofmann. Hans Hofmann also had a school in New York City. But Vitlichil suggested to Libbie Mark, why don't you get in touch with Hofmann and see if you can get into his school, his summer program in Provincetown. And so she did that. And in 1957, she took his class, his course, in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And this was a great moment for her in her life, I think. She began to really see a direction for her art. After that, and she was, by the way, taking his class the very last year that he was offering it in Provincetown, because after that he decided to, this was 1957, after that he decided to devote himself to his career, his art, and he died in 1966, but in that time, between 57 and 66, he produced the most incredible art and very, very big work. So he devoted himself to his own career. But that time that he spent with, she spent with him in Provincetown was very important to her, because then every year she returned to Provincetown and she met other artists who were there, mostly in the summertime, Rothko and other people that she knew, maybe even Helen Frankenthaler, because she was there at Provincetown at various times. Now, when you look at her work, when you look at Libbie Mark's work, you can see a kind of progression from the various studios that she had. To me, it's an indication of a very practical consideration. She has space considerations. For example, Lee Krasner had the same issue. When she was making art in an upstairs bedroom, her paintings were all very small. And then eventually, after Pollock died, she took over the studio, and then her paintings became very large. In the case of Libbie's work, you can see along here, for example, I forgot looking at the photograph of that, how small it actually was, the one in the two drawings, and then there's one painting in the middle. This is an earlier work of hers. It's a work in the 1950s. But when she came to New York, she went through various stages of moving into the city. But when the children had grown up and were in college, I have a list of places where they lived. They lived in an apartment, 35 East 85th Street, and she worked nearby there. And then they moved to 176 East 71st Street, and there she had a separate studio unit. So at that point, her work becomes much larger, and I think the example that you see right over there will tell you that. And then there's some in the back too that are quite large. She continued to work, and I think there's also some changes in her materials, and you might even say her methods. For example, there are a few works early on that are oil paintings. Some are even on canvas. But later, she works exclusively in acrylics, which is not so unusual because acrylics became enormously popular for artists. But also, acrylic, it dries more quickly. And she developed another interest. She started introducing paper onto the canvas. She called them collage paintings, and she wasn't the only one doing this. I can think of a number of artists who were doing that, among others, Willem de Kooning, Larry Rivers, whether or not she actually studied with him in Great Neck, and there are others as well. And what it does is to bring texture to the painting without using very heavy application of paint. In other words, you don't have to sit there with a palette knife and apply huge brush strokes or palette knife applications of paint onto the canvas. The paper that she put on, I think, gave her an opportunity to introduce texture. The other thing I notice about her work, and on the far left there, and then there's another drawing that's a little bit away from her. From that, there's a painting in between that is, I think that one's an oil, isn't it? It's pretty early. Is it acrylic or oil? I can't remember. But anyway, the two drawings, the far drawings, they are an example of a kind of improvisational effect that she's introducing. And these are earlier works of hers. But one of the things that really surprised me was that she was developing and using a technique that another artist that I'm involved with, Dorothy Dater, was also using, which is to paint on a wet surface. You know, in other words, to apply some, this is a watercolor, so apply some water to the surface. And this is a paper that has a lot of texture. And then to let the color bleed out from the image into the rest of the composition. And that's something that, it's like wet on wet. That's the way it's described. And she's doing that in the work that you see there. But after she studied with Hoffman that wonderful summer of 1957, we see some changes in her work. We see her work getting larger, and we see it getting very strongly gestural. And the painting that you see on the far right here, the one that has the green shoe on the lower level, there's several things I want to say about that. She studied life drawing. I've been putting this all together over time. She studied life drawing when she was a student at the Art Students League. Hoffman always had a model. He always used a model, at least for part of the classes. And there's so many drawings done by Mercedes Matter, by Lee Krasner, by all of the different people that studied with Hoffman. And he very firmly believed in the study of the nude figure. He also believed, you know, he talked about this idea of push-pull and, you know, the relationship of the parts. Sometimes it involved color. You know, there's a kind of push and pull in the color choices, but there's also a push and pull and a density and less density, different effects that you can find, for example, in a work like that. You see it in terms of, I mean, there are no figures in there per se, but there's almost the sense of this environment that the artist has created for herself in creating a painting like that. In the back of the room, there are larger canvases that she did in the 1960s. Most of them, not all. And the paintings got much larger because she had a studio and she had an opportunity. And remember, all this time, I am convinced that she was looking at other people's work. So she was keeping up with what was going on among the abstract expressionists. We know that she knew Grace Hartigan. She even bought a painting of Grace Hartigan. And she was tuned in, you might say, to what was going on in the art world, even though she perhaps was not showing it in many of the group exhibitions that, for example, the Stable Gallery had. They had a series of these exhibitions all through the 1950s. She wasn't in those exhibitions. Eventually, though, she joined a group called the Vectors. And the Vectors had shows in various places in New York. There were a lot of women that belonged to that group. And they were a little different because, you know, there was another group called the American Abstract Artists Group. I never heard that, you know, she was involved in that group at all. But the Vectors had regular shows, and she did exhibit with them. So we have an artist who had really advanced over time, had studied with really important people, especially her study with Hans Hofmann, but also she was fully aware, it's obvious looking at these paintings, that she was fully aware of what other people were doing, what other artists were doing, and she was able to contribute in her own way. These aren't copies of other people. They're her style, they're her ideas, and they're very much her creations. But they are still within the range of art that we associate with the abstract expressionists. Now, one of the things, unfortunately, that makes somewhat of a difference for her is that she didn't get a chance to see how women were going to eventually succeed, because she passed away at the age of 66. So in 1972, she was no longer making her art. And yet we have these paintings we have, thanks to Jennifer and the wonderful foundation that was set up, they've been beautifully framed, and they're here with us today, and we have also a catalog that was done of the work, and I think that they will continue to have a place among the women of abstract expressionism. Maybe if, you know, a book like this is done again, she will be included. So I'll pass my baton or whatever on to Jennifer, who's going to tell you a little bit more about her life.
Well, so Joan actually covered a good chunk of, oh, there goes the mic. Joan actually covered a good portion of the biography that I was going to give you. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about, sort of reciting dates and events for Libbie, was that, and Joan has already brought this up, is that it was actually a very short lifespan and a very short period of time in which she was actually working. And so when she first started taking art classes, she was 43. By the time her kids went off to college and she started going into New York, living in New York on a trial basis while she took classes, she was 51. She permanently moved to New York to be closer to the art scene, started taking classes there at age 53. And she had her first and only solo show, except now this is her second solo show. Her first and only solo show, she was 57. And so her next solo show this year is 60 years later. And so, as Joan said, she passed away at age 66. And so she had less than 25 years of time to make this work. And so looking back at, and I should say, the work that I've been doing on behalf of the family through the Libbie Mark Provincetown Fund, my work has been to catalog and document the work that she has made. And I have about 140 pieces so far that I have documented, mostly in the family. Some other, private collectors, people who surfaced actually since the show was advertised. I actually got to visit one I had never seen before just yesterday up on the Upper East Side. And so, there's about 140 pieces so far. I'm hoping we will find more. But you can't help but wonder, if she had more time, if she lived longer, what would she have accomplished? Maybe more people would have known about her and her work if she had a little more time. And so in this, challenge for women in the 50s and 60s, and of course now, to be recognized for the work that they're doing, she definitely had some challenges and some disadvantages, having not had a full life. And at the same time, she also made a choice, and which no one's going to blame her for. She made a choice to sort of wait until her children were off to college in order to really start getting serious about her work. And she was a woman, so there's that as well. But she also had some great advantages that a lot of other artists, female artists, did not have, which Joan also mentions, and that is that she had an extremely supportive husband who wanted to do whatever he could to support her making her work. And so they also had the financial means in order to do what she did, which is take these classes, relocate to be closer to the art scene, spend summers in Provincetown, invest in a separate studio space. So there was some financial advantage there. But also, she had this, emotional and encouragement, emotional support and encouragement from her husband. And I think, that certainly made a difference, and I think it helped her achieve what she did achieve. And so it's, it's kind of an interesting relationship, I think, between the two of them. Apparently he even helped, learned how to stretch canvases and make picture frames, and help support what she was doing. And so, a lot of what I say about Libbie is that she really, she had the support and she had sort of financial means, but it doesn't mean that this was a hobby for her. I think it's pretty clear that she was very serious about what she was doing, and she was producing really interesting and really good work. And she made a lot of decisions through her life to make that happen. And so I think that's one of the most interesting things I've learned in looking at her work, learning about her through her family. I've been working with them for maybe about the last 5 years, and it's been very interesting sort of piecing together her life story and seeing how she managed to get as far as she did with the time that she had. And I think that the show that we have up here, the catalog, the talk, all this kind of work right now on bringing her sort of back out into the world, I think is a very important thing. And hopefully, as Jen said, going forward, she will really have the exposure that she should have had back then, and hopefully more people will be able to see her work and appreciate it. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say in terms of the biography, because I think between the two of us, we really covered a good amount of it.
Yeah, well, I think the important thing, you said that, she just wasn't doing this to amuse herself. I think she has a very, very serious approach to her work, and that's why I keep emphasizing the fact that I know she was looking at other artists, and she was really taking it all in and absorbing what was going on in the work of other people, and then seeing the way in which she could use some of those ideas and those approaches in her own work. And of course, she was a student for a long time, really, because she studied first in Great Neck, and then she went to the Art Students League. She was determined. And I would guess also, even after the Provincetown period no longer included Hans Hofmann because he didn't have a school, there were still quite a number of abstract expressionist artists who were still going to Provincetown in the summer. And she spent the entire summer there. So she had many opportunities to interact with other artists, and she took advantage of that.
One of the areas of research that I'd like to expand on, Joan mentioned the artist group, the Vectors, that Libbie was a member of for a time. The Vectors, this is one area where she was clearly surrounded by a whole lot of other people doing interesting work, and I'm just starting to do research on some of the members of that group. They were active from the late 50s to the late 60s, so about a 10-year period, and she was active within about 5 years of that. And over time, I think in total there were about 30 different artist members, and but even with that kind of turnover, there were always at least 50%, if not more, women as part of that group, which I think is a really interesting thing. And most of those artists are not that well known, but I'm hoping to do some more research there, and maybe there's an opportunity for a show or a paper or a book or something, sort of bringing that collective back together. So I think that aside from going to galleries and seeing shows and having the classes that she took, there's definitely a lot of interaction with the artists in that group as well.
One thing you learn if you read Mary Gabriel's book is it makes very clear that when these male artists married a woman that was an artist, they expected her to be a wife. They expected her to cook. Most of them did not have too much of an interest in having children. We know, for example, Olive and Fraser didn't have children. We can name all of the ones that did not have children. But having a wife was something else. They did expect that. Elaine never cooked. Lee cooked. Lee and Jackson both cooked, as a matter of fact. But she spends a lot of time talking about Elaine de Kooning, because what Elaine de Kooning did for Bill de Kooning was she didn't function very well as a wife, but she became an art critic, which was not a bad thing. So she had all kinds of people that she associated with. But in any case, there's a lot of there was a lot of presuppositions on the part of these men. You hear it over and over again as you move through these artist couples. At one point I was doing a lot of study of artist couples, partially because Dorothy Dadner was married to David Smith, and that was a marriage that didn't really work out so well. But the idea of two artists being married, and I know some couples even now, it's not so easy. It's not so easy for them. But these artists, you know, she's very open, Mary Gabriel, talking about the fact that the men were disappointed that they didn't get a wife. You know, they got a partner, sort of, but they didn't get a wife. And they definitely felt that their career was more important, which of course the art world supported at the time. You know, why nobody? These women were showing. I think the most important thing that I've learned in my more recent work that I've been doing is how many of these women were showing in group exhibitions. There was this thing called the 9th Street Show, for example. There were a whole bunch of women in that show. And then they continued to show. Well, what happened to them after that? No, nobody was looking at their work. Nobody wanted to buy their work. And their prices remained very low. That's changed too. I think in part it's changed because nobody's buying de Koonings these days. Can't find them, and certainly can't afford them. Even now, there's certain of the women that have, you know, are going up and up, like Joan M. So, I mean, I think we should, you know, have some questions.
Sure.
There's always a lot of talk about Greenberg making the arts.
Yeah,
And if
like
you didn't
Alan.
fall under his light, you had a tough time. And if the women were not endorsed by him, there was sort of a dead end. And if she didn't have a gallery, and I guess a lot of those women didn't have galleries.
Well, but the truth is,
Well, some of them did.
Betty Parsons, for example, had a lot of women that she was showing. She did show women. She was very interested in women artists. She had Judith Godwin, for example, is somebody that I knew, and Anita.
Betty Parsons first showed a woman. Her shows had always been male. And she put one woman in, an artist I showed, Jean Miles. That was the first time a woman was put into a major gallery. And all the men took their work right off the walls and walked out down this hall to the other gallery. Remember the man? Which one?
57th Street.
Yeah, there was another gallery on her floor. And he took them all. He was like a fashion maker, a shirt seller. But he took all those men, and he did very well with that. But when these galleries, it was like racist almost. If you were a woman, they wouldn't show you, no matter how good you were. So, and that was a true story anyway, about things like that.
What year was it?
What?
What year?
Oh, that must have been in the early 50s.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the other things. Not only were there problems with women, the black people could never show. They didn't show the blacks. They didn't show the Asians. It was a white society. Plus, you had uptown and you had downtown, the galleries. And the uptown galleries were the more influential. They had more money. They could charge more. They got their more famous names. There were a limited number of galleries anyway in the 40s and 50s. You didn't have as many galleries. So you had Soho developing down there. You had Uptown, 57th Street. And you had these two groups. And the artists themselves were in two different groups. The ones that stayed uptown were a different breed, more or less. The ones that were downtown were the really more abstract expressionists, were more downtown than uptown. And they had the club that they all went to.
Right.
and they had their meetings at the club. So there was something that was in the air. And then you've got another story about abstract expressionists that you should know. The abstract expressionists had more or less two groups. The groups that came from the western part of America, California. You had the real American for abstract expressionists that came from there. Then you had the New York side here. That was a strain that was more European. They came with European backgrounds and they were shunted more there. So there was a difference even between the groups of abstract expressionists. Excuse me for breaking in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. I have a few questions, but they're not hard. One is, I noticed that none of these paintings and works of art are signed. Did she not sign her paintings on purpose?
Actually, a good number of them are signed. Sometimes they're on the front, sometimes they're on the back.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes they're very hard to find.
And are
So-
these paintings currently on sale?
No. So part of the work that I'm doing for the family and for the fund initially was to research and document and write about Libbie and try to get that information and the images out there. And then the next phase is to find homes for the paintings. They really deserve to be in collections. They need to be in museums. And so
Did
that's
she
sort of,
herself sell when she was working?
she did. I don't know. We don't have any record of sales. I don't know how many she sold. I do have, the family has some paperwork. For instance, there was a checklist left over from the solo show that she did have at Knappich Gallery in 1962. Some of the paintings do have prices, on the back from the time that they were exhibited. The vectors, when she exhibited with them, I have some checklists and price lists. So she was selling. I just don't have a lot of documentation in terms of how many. And I also can say, recently, her daughter Judy told me that, and I think there are other artists who said this as well. She thought of her paintings as her children, and so didn't want to necessarily let them go. So I think there was some of that as well. Actually, right here.
So, on the theme of children, we have today with us Libbie's son. I'm curious if I didn't have an opportunity to meet this person, but what are some recollections of living with the mother who became artist so late? What are those experiences? And my second question is to the future of this exhibition. Any thoughts about digitizing it into the meta space, ETFs?
So there is a website, libbiemark.com, that is already in existence. And when I have the time to recover from organizing the show, writing the catalog, doing the talk, taking the show down, there will be probably a new page on the website that will have installation views from the show and other information about the show. This talk is being recorded, so that will also be up there as well. I'd love to be able to find another venue for the show outside of New York somewhere, so if anyone has any suggestions or if you have a museum that would like to take a show, definitely let me know. I think this really needs to be seen elsewhere. And yeah, they're ready to go, they're all framed. And in terms of Libbie's son, Ruben, I don't know if you have any stories that you would like to tell or not about your mother working and painting while you were growing up, if you...
Only that, as you can imagine, there was considerable jealousy of the time she spent painting, and I think that's probably a pretty natural reaction. I think my sister appreciated it more than I did. In those days when you were a kid and abstract art was something to laugh at rather than appreciate. I do remember, though, that I had a couple of paintings in when I was going to school. and they were a little dingy, so I mentioned to everyone that I took the Ajax cleaner and went over it, and it got bright. I don't think it's being shown today.
I'm gonna have to find out which ones those were.
But overall, I know my sister appreciated it more. As I say, we tried to understand it, but inevitably there was a conflict. She was deadly serious about it. She was a woman who had an extraordinary sense of humor, but when she was doing this, she was dead serious.
That's another question over here.
Can you just speak to how the show was arranged, the seedling of the show? How did this come about?
How did this come about? Connections, which, everything happens by connections. So Libbie's daughter, Judy, taught at SUNY Stony Brook, and one of her former students has a partner who is a member of the Arts Club, and Rob, who's here this evening. And so once we had gotten to the point of being able to document the work and get the website up so there were images to look at, I believe that was shared through Rob and then through the club and the curator, Robert Yonner, and they were really interested in the work and invited us to have a show. I think initially they were talking about a group show of abstract expressionist women, and then once they saw more of her work, as far as I understand it, they thought that she should just have her own show. And so that's how it started, and then there were a lot of conversations that I had back and forth with the curator here, Robert, in deciding what pieces would go in the show. And then, and I'm actually based in Boston, so it's a lot of remote back and forth conversations trying to work this out. And once the works arrived here, I came in and we collaborated together in terms of the layout of the show and the order, the sequencing of the paintings, which really is an art in itself, to try to figure out, visual relationships and size and all that, and sort of make the whole thing work. And then, we also decided to do a catalog for it. It made sense to finally give Libbie a catalog, and so I arranged for photography and design and wrote essay for the catalog. Rob also wrote an essay for the catalog, and so we have that as well. So she finally has some good hard copy documentation also of her work. New York. So it's the Libbie Mark Provincetown Fund, named after, of course, her important time in Provincetown, but they're based in New York. And so the fund is essentially supporting the work that I'm doing and researching, writing, and promoting the work. And in the future, I think there's potentially the interest in supporting exhibitions and programming of other, under-recognized women artists as well. But for now, it's concentrating on working on Libbie. Yeah.
Jennifer?
Yes.
One more little observation. The painting behind me.
Let me give you a mic first.
Behind me.
Yeah, there's a mic. Thanks,
The
Ruben.
big painting behind me, which is definitely a vertical. On the back, there's a big arrow going vertically. But it was one of my particular favorites. And so for about 30 years or more, I had that hanging in my office horizontally. And it was only until Jennifer put it up here that I saw the dynamism in it. Actually, when it's on the side, it's sort of going like, it's depressing. Whereas when it's vertical, it's uplifting.
So that's one of the paintings that is signed, and that's how I knew it was supposed to be a vertical and not a horizontal. There is a signature there. And that's actually one thing I'd like to point out about her paintings, which I think is really interesting. She was very much a vertical painter and not a horizontal painter. And so not everything, but a lot of the works, and I think a lot of the better works, are vertical, which I think is kind of unusual. It's much harder to create a composition that way, I think, than a horizontal. And so a lot of the pieces, like Ruben was just describing with this one, they really have these great diagonals, vertical, upper left, lower right kind of motion to them, which I think is really interesting. And you'll see that over and over again. Now that you start looking, you'll see there's this sort of motion. This one in the back here as well is sort of pink diagonal zigzag that goes up and down. So I think that's a very interesting aspect of her work. Another question? Oh, hang on 1 second. We'll get you a mic.
Joan knows about this book, Artist Estates, Reputations and Trust. So I brought this now because I gave the idea to Magda Salveson to write the book years ago. And this is a book that's being reissued now. It's available on Amazon because the first printing came from your school, Rutgers Press. And they sold out. And I think they only made 5 or 10,000 copies. And it's an interesting book about different artists and what happened when they made foundations and what happened to their work. So any of you people that have that kind of interest and have art collections or know of people, I think this is a very good book for you to read. It's an excellent book. Of course, I'm in it, so I feel good.
Thank you. So I think we have another question. Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about the brevity of her career. Do you know anything about her timeline of working on a piece, if anything's known about it, and kind of the time she spent in the studio on each work?
So there's not a whole lot of documentation of how she worked unless it's a family memory, and maybe there's stories Ruben hasn't told me yet. But I can think of at least one painting where it had a span of dates on the back of it, where clearly she started it, in 1 year and maybe 3, 4, 5 years later finished it, because she actually put 2 dates on it instead of 1. But in terms of how long she spent on each painting, or did she go back and forth between one or more, that's something that I just don't know. I would love to be able to find, correspondence or diaries, and I don't think that really exists. So it's definitely been a challenge writing about her, even sort of strictly biographical type information, but also beyond that and how she worked. And Ruben, I don't know if that's something that you can answer, and maybe not. Because one of the things we both made a point of is that she really got into what she was doing after kids went to college, busy with their own lives and not necessarily physically there, say in her studio or watching her work.
I have a follow-up question too. Is there any sort of process sketches or smaller works that she was working on then translated into larger ones that you found?
I don't think I've so far seen anything that looks like a beginning sketch for something else. Their, earlier work, Joan was talking about how she took, figure study classes. There might be a charcoal figure drawing or something like that. But I haven't seen anything that looks like it's the beginnings of something bigger. And with abstract painting, my thought with her, and probably others too, is that they might just be starting right in on the thing rather than starting with preliminary sketches. But again, we can only speculate how she worked. So I don't know if there's any other questions. We could probably wrap it up. There's one actually. No, sorry. No question. There's one announcement I wanted to make, and actually I wanted to acknowledge a person. Unfortunately, one of Libbie's granddaughters passed away on Saturday. Her name was Marcia Tanner, and so unfortunately, and this is so Libbie's daughter Judy. This is her daughter, Marcia, and so I just want to express condolences to the family, and unfortunately, some family couldn't be here because of that. Marcia actually loaned a few paintings to the exhibition. She was at the opening, so she got to see the show. And actually, the first piece on the left here on the wall is called For Marcia, and Libbie painted, I think in almost every case, a work to celebrate the birth of a grandchild, and so that one is for Marcia. So I want to, invite you to go visit that work when we're done with the talk here. But I just wanted to acknowledge her. And so I think if we don't have any other questions, I just want to thank everyone for coming and thank the club for hosting the exhibition.
I wanted to thank Anita Shapolsky for coming and also for her support of women artists because I know some of the artists' work that she represents. I met Amaranth Aronholt and I met also Sonia Gaschow I knew for a long time. Pardon me? Buffy Johnson, of course, yes. So this is a woman dealer who has been very supportive of women artists, and we appreciate that.
And just a couple other things. As we mentioned, there is a catalog for the show for sale if anyone would like a catalog. There's a QR code on the poster over there, and actually I have a QR code here as well. And if you scan it with your phone's camera app, you can pay. You can use a credit card. You don't need a special app in order to do it. And the way it works is you scan the code, you get a receipt on your phone, and you show it to the front desk, and they hand you a catalog. So I just wanted to put that out there. And as well, so the show is up until February 25th, so a week from Friday. So if you have any friends you think would like to come see the show, please invite them. And Libbie Mark is also on Instagram. So at Libbie Mark Artist, there's a lot more information you'll find there and on the website. And my supportive husband is gesturing to me to remind people that there is a comment book where you can also sign up for the email list for Libbie Mark. Hopefully we'll have future shows. And if you have any issues with the QR code, come find me. Sometimes technology doesn't make things simpler, but I'll do my best to help. So, thank you.